Nope, nobody here yet. All right. Shalom, everyone. Thanks for joining us here at Living Messiah, our Tuesday night Bible study. Those online, thanks so much for joining us, and those here, thank you for joining. First let me open in prayer. That's always a good thing to do. Father, Yahweh, great and mighty you are. Father, there is none like you. Father, be with us today as we look into your house, your tabernacle, and the instructions. Father, we thank you for your faithfulness to this ministry. We thank you for your love and your mercy that you show to each and every one of us. And Father, the purpose, as you know, we come so we can grow closer to you, Father. So be with us and empower us with your Spirit so we can overcome all things. Father, your wisdom and your insight we desire. We thank you again for all you do. Amen. All right. Well, great. Cool. So what I had planned to do, obviously we're in Exodus 36. I know Mark, he left off like 36:8, so we will pick up there. So what I was thinking, there might be a slight review just to refresh us. But basically, I know the last time I was here with you guys, if I remember right, we were talking about the items that were going to be in the tabernacle. And now here, we're actually going to be hearing some of the instructions for the building of those furnishings that go in there. So it is the building of the tabernacle. So here will be the instructions, and you will see that there's several chapters that are dedicated to this very task and around the tabernacle itself. Not only how to build it, but then the task of how the operations went on as far as the priest and what they did. And then you have the book of Leviticus. It goes into even more about the specific services that happen at this place and how they maintain the tabernacle as well. So let's remember some of the simple things I think are very important for us. Remember, this is the meeting place for the children of God, for the children of Elohim to meet with their Father and to grow closer, obviously, with their Heavenly Father. At this place and how they maintain. All right, you got that? Okay, all right, great. Thanks for those joining us online as well. So I'll try to, if there's any comments or questions, I'll try to, it's off to my right here, so I'll try to keep tabs on that for any questions or comments. So, and again, have mercy on me. This is new as far as looking to my left for information, and to my right I have my notes, and then looking forward. So I'll try my best to do this. So like I was saying, where we're at, we're talking about the tabernacle and the instructions. And obviously this is a huge study in itself, and we're only going to be touching the surface of some of this and in that aspect of it. So what I was thinking when I was Mark wanted me to sit in to do this. It was like kind of last minute, but not. But still, I think we'll get through it just fine. But that being said, I'm sure you guys all recognize this. If you've bought any IKEA products, you've had instructions that look something similar to this. So, and that's what we're going to be looking at. It's the instructions are really detailed on how and the materials that are used. But I think there are basic things that we can learn. One of the basics that I see is it was portable. The limited materials used, there was an order to the pattern and the function of the tabernacle as well. Shalom, Paul. I had the house itself. If we like an overview, it had limited furnishings that were for specific services and ultimately specific meanings and things that can teach us behind it. These furnishings, let alone the house itself, was set apart for the services and the duties that were only specific to this tent, to this house, okay? One, I mentioned before, it also was a meeting place. And that stays pretty consistent even up until the building of the tabernacle, of being a consistent meeting place for his people. But this IKEA instructions I had, it was kind of interesting. And how many times have you looked at a box and it says some assembly required? Well, I thought it was kind of interesting if we really look at what's going to be happening here. Assembly is required for building this house, and that means all the assembly was required to build this tabernacle. And we see that those whose hearts were moved, okay, the assembly, the people came together and built this. All had opportunity to play a part in this project here. Okay, so it was up to them whether they participated or not. So I know we're in Exodus 36, and we left off at 36:8. At least that's what was written down where Mark had said he left off. But I just want to go back to verse 1 because it gives us a lot of insight. And again, I'm not sure what Mark talked about, as far as that. I wasn't able to tune in. But we have two particular people that are very, very important. The one, Bezalel, okay, Bezalel, in his name has meaning behind it, which I think is very interesting. It has in the shadow of Elohim, or in the shadow of God, in the shadow of El. And the second gentleman, his name, I practiced this, but I know I'm going to mess these up. Ohel El of. Anyhow, this gentleman, his name means father's tent. So if we were, so to speak, would look at what's going on here, they're the foreman or the manager. Maybe Moses is that, but they play a huge part in the construction of what's being happen. So we have this idea in these two gentlemen's names, because their names are pointed out specifically. Is why I'm mentioning them, that you'll see in the text. The shadow of the Father's tent or dwelling place. That's what we have here if we combine the meeting and these two people's names. So what I think is interesting, back in Exodus 31:2, see, I have called by name Belasar of Ur. Okay, he's from the tribe of Judah. And the other gentleman, he's from the tribe of Dan, which is kind of interesting. As far as I can remember, usually out of the tribe of Dan, there was a lot of issues of a lot of problems came from people from the tribe of Dan in the history that I can recall. So, but that it's just interesting to know their background and where they come from or what tribe the association was. But Yahweh says that I have filled him with the spirit of wisdom and understanding and the knowledge and all the work to make the designs for the work of gold, silver, and the bronze, and the cutting of stones for the setting of the carving of the wood, and to work all the work. And then Oholivah, okay, it says, and I have appointed him, and it's not moed, the word being used there, but it comes across, but it more says I have given or I have set him, okay? I set him, he's from the tribe of Dan, to have put wisdom in the hearts of everyone who is wise-hearted, that they would come and obey the commandment of bringing this stuff for the construction of the tabernacle and its furnishing. So, so where we left off, what do I have here? Let's just read on. And Moses called Belsar and Eliel and every wise-hearted man in whose heart Yahweh have given wisdom, everyone whose heart lifted him up to come and do the work. And they received from Moses all the contribution which the children of Israel had brought for the work of the service of making the set-apart place. But they still brought to him voluntary offerings every morning. And all the craftsmen who were doing all the work of the set-apart place came, each from the work he was doing. And they spoke to Moses, saying, the people bring much more than enough for the service of the work which Yahweh commanded us to do. Then Moses commanded, and they sent this word throughout the camp, saying, let neither man or woman, that's interesting too, wasn't just the men here, the men and women were at work doing things, whatever that might be, materials that would come and be brought. But let neither man or woman do any more work for the contribution of the set-apart place. And the people were withheld from bringing, for what they had was enough for all the work to be done, more than enough. So a lot of people's hearts were moved. That's the way I would understand the simplicity of it. And again, what I want to point out here is, who's building the tabernacle? Really, you see what I'm saying about all of the assembly was required, and all the assembly, in a sense, participate in doing this project. So I think that is very important because, I would say it's very important to think of that sense because maybe I'm the only one, but coming out of the institutions that we've come out of, you happen to see there's always this idea of this personal Lord and Savior idea, which I'm not saying is wrong, but I think what happens, we forget how much it's a corporate identity that we should have as He is our God, and that's, in a sense, you guys know what I'm talking about, because in the Shema, He is our God. It doesn't say He's my God, it's our God. So it is a community aspect here, that we see. So let's continue. Then all the wise-hearted ones among them who worked on the dwelling place made curtains woven of fine linen and blue and purple and scarlet materials. They made them with cherubim, the work of a skilled workman. The length of each curtain was 28 cubits, and the length of each curtain 4 cubits, and all the curtains having one measure. And he joined the 5 curtains one to another. In the other 5 curtains he joined one to another. And he made loops of blue blue on the edge of the end of the curtains, one set, and the same he did on the edge of the curtain of the other set. 50 loops he made on one curtain, and 50 loops he made on the edge of the end curtain of the second set. The loops held one curtain to another. And he made 50 hoops of gold and joined the curtains to each other with the hooks, and the dwelling place became one. I'm focusing, as you know, there's a lot of stuff here as well, but I'm looking at some of the key things here. It became one. It became whole, so to speak. So in this, you see highlighted skilled workman. I looked into that a little bit, and it's interesting about that word. It has the idea of being cunning. Now, you got to understand that's the same kind of idea that we would associate with the serpent, because he was crafty or cunning, or someone who's cunning sometimes doesn't, it's not a positive. But yet, or it's not a positive, but the positive part of that behind the Hebrew, when I was looking at it, has the idea of thinking something through. So in this case, skilled workman really fits well, because that is what it's trying to portray. It's the sense of intricate design, okay? A work of a thinker, one who thinks this out, the sense of a designer, you know? And I can kind of relate to that a lot in some of the things I have to do, designing a logo for a company or whatever. I think it through and all the aspects of it. And the same it can be in various other types of field, whether you're a plumber, you know, you have to be skilled. You think it through. You just don't run in and, you know, put pipes where they don't need to be or adhere them the way they don't. So there's a lot of thinking and skill that went in, and these gentlemen had that, and that's what it's speaking about. And I think that was all for all who actually did work on the tabernacle. It wasn't just a bunch of people who didn't know what they were doing. You know, they actually had some skills there. You know, as Napoleon Dynamite would say, I got skills. Now, the other word, dwelling place. I think this is interesting to focus on, because after all this work is going into this particular structure. And that word, dwelling place, the Hebrew behind it is mishkan, okay? Back in Exodus 25:9, it says this, according to all that I show you, he's speaking to Moses, after the pattern of the mishkan, the dwelling place, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, this is what you're to make, Moses. Moses is given a pattern of what this was to be. So Mishkan, I think, is actually a dwelling place rather than tabernacle. Well, maybe not so much, but dwelling place in our English tells you exactly what it is. A tabernacle, maybe not so. But dwelling place really describes this word, because that's where it comes from. Mishkan comes from a verb, shakan, and means to dwell. So it's really, a dwelling place really, I think, fits the Hebrew concept that's behind this. Why do I have this here? I'm not sure why I got that in my note. It'll come to me. Oh, okay, that's why. Because this is why. Okay. In Leviticus 26, like I said, it speaks of the tabernacle a lot too. There's this verse, Leviticus 26:11, and it says, I shall set my dwelling place, right? My dwelling place in your midst, and my being shall not reject you. I think that's pretty powerful. So it's a place where he wants to dwell, okay? But right before that, I think is very, very, very important. Whatever theological background you're coming from. You know, he wants his dwelling place in his midst, so he's not going to be appalled by you, you know, that his being will not reject you. Well, what it says right before this is Leviticus 26:1. It begins this way: "Do not make idols for yourself, and do not set up carved images or a pillar for yourself, and do not place a stone image in your land to bow down to it, for I am Yahweh your Elohim." And it goes on: "Guard my Sabbaths and revere my set-apart place, my dwelling place. I am Yahweh, for I walk in, if you walk in my laws, my Torah, and guard my commands, and you shall do them." Then it says, towards the end of that, it goes on a little bit long, "And I will set my dwelling place in your midst, if you do what those things I just read to you." So I think it's very important. If you want your God to dwell with you, he lays down a lot of things that he's looking for that you do so that can happen. So, which is kind of interesting. This is kind of going to maybe a side note here, but I think it plays a part in this whole idea of dwelling. Okay? You guys have heard the Shekinah glory? It plays a part in this whole concept, and I think it's interesting when I was looking at it, when I was trying to get some notes together for this evening. So the word Shekinah, it does not appear in the Bible. I know. I was amazed too. I'm like, oh, no, it doesn't. But it's still coming from that same type of root, Shekan, okay? But it does not appear in the Bible. And there's various ways you can spell it in English, obviously. It's, again, it coming from that root word, that verb, to dwell. The Jewish rabbis coined this word, this expression, from the Hebrew that actually means he causes to dwell. So that's the Shekinah glory, that he causes to dwell. And normally when you're talking about the Almighty, he causes to be whatever he causes himself to be, if you start really thinking about that. So, so it also has this idea signifying that it was the divine visitation, the presence, or the dwelling of the Almighty on earth. Just that statement alone weighs pretty heavy when we start to think about things in the text when we read them. So Shekinah, it's, in some ways I see, is God's manifested glory, or ultimately Elohim's presence. This word may not, like I said, be in the Bible, but the concept clearly is there. Okay? So even though the word's not there, we can see this idea there. Later, Jewish scholars use this to refer to the dwelling place of Elohim, and especially it's associated with the temple in Jerusalem. So there's association with it, obviously, because it's a dwelling place. That's easy to see. So it goes. Some of the research I was looking at, and the description from rabbinic writings, the Shekinah was first evident with the Hebrews, coming to Sukkot when they escaped Egypt. There, the Lord appeared in the cloudy pillar by day and a fiery pillar by night. So they're associating, they would call that the Shekinah glory, the presence of the Almighty. And what I just read to you, I'll read it from the text itself, what I just read to you about that. Exodus 13:21 and 22. "And Yahweh went before them by day in the column of the cloud to lead them," because it says exactly who this was. It wasn't just a cloud. It seemed to be a little bit more than just a cloud here. They, a cloud, led them the way, and by night in a column of fire to give them light, so as to go by day and night. So it sounds like he's present all the time. The column cloud did not cease day or nor night, or the column of fire by night before the people. So I started thinking about that because I never really dug into that idea of the Shekinah glory, and I've read about it here and there, and I had a small concept of it, but never really thought about it. But it's associated with this idea of dwelling, though. So it is associated with the Mishkan, the dwelling place. But this idea that the presence of the Almighty would be dwelling on earth, was it just limited to the tabernacle only? No, it seems like, even from our Jewish brothers, it's associated with the column. Before the tabernacle was, before the Mishkan of a dwelling place was designed. Then I started thinking, well, what about the burning bush? Could we say that was the Shekinah, the presence of the Almighty speaking to Moshe? What about the 3 visitors that came before Abraham? One of them was clearly a manifestation, of Yahweh. It seems to be very clear. And then so many times it says the word of Yahweh came to such and such, or the messenger of Yahweh came. And to me, looking at those things, it was quite evident who that was. It wasn't just a mere messenger, it seemed to be Yahweh himself. So I don't know why you couldn't say that was the Shekinah glory, the presence of the Almighty in that. Now here's something, and this is always hard for any of us, if we don't put our Elohim in a theological box, okay? I believe we can learn more about him. So the Shekinah is Elohim, as Elohim is dwelling within as well. Sometimes the Shekinah glory is translated as, like I said, a divine presence. The Shekinah is, ultimately, it pops up in the Talmud, or Talmudic concept representing Elohim's dwelling in this world, like I said. But here's something interesting that threw me, but yet all of a sudden it reminded me of something. The Shekinah is gendered feminine in the Hebrew. So the best way to understand that, and I think the proper way to understand that, is represents Elohim's feminine attributes, okay? The attributes of our divine God. Because remember, he did make humanity, male and female, in the image of him, okay? So let's not get too whacked out on, you calling him a woman? No, that's not what I'm saying at all, okay? So this is interesting to me because there is another word that we, from the Christian side of the, so to speak, use a lot, and it's feminine as well, and that's the Ruach. It too is a feminine word. The set-apart spirit. So the Shekinah I repeated myself here. So if both those words, because we would understand the set-apart spirit, the Ruach, in the same way that our Jewish brothers in some ways understand the Shekinah. So I don't In some ways, I don't see any big difference between the two as far as, let's say, action and what they're doing, leading the way. His divine presence is all about him and who he is. So if he's not going to change his character, so that embodies all the same commandments and everything else. But this is interesting that I thought when I came across this. A lot of Jews, you've heard of the minyan, where they get together, 10 males get together. Some of them say when 10 of them get together and pray, the Shekinah is there. I hope that sounds familiar. When 2 or more are you gathered, I'm there in your presence. So I just think that was really, I'm there in your midst. It's not, I just, and you can go in your mind and start thinking a lot of crisscrossing of that same concept. I just thought it was a beautiful thing. So what we have is, if this is his house, what can we learn from it? And we are the children of that household or that family, then what we're going to be seeing here is a template for the children, the people of God. And it's interesting, that's the same way that Rav Saul uses to speak about ourselves. He uses this concept of the Mishkan, the dwelling place, to teach us about ourselves. Because if this household is doing that, which I believe it is, this idea, it's about ourselves and how we are a form and a likeness of that household. Are we not to do that? The family that we're part of, we are to be that likeness of that household because we're representing that household, that name of that household. So you can, to me, that dwelling place, that house, we are representing that. The likeness of that house, that dwelling place. And we would say that's the dwelling place of what? The set apart spirit of the Most High. It's kind of interesting because I'm going to read to you 1 Corinthians 6:19. Or do you not know that your body is a mishkan, a dwelling place of the set apart spirit? You see right away, even to me, that's why I don't think I'm that far off, seeing the Shekinah and the set apart spirit, they seem to be the titles of the same and one and only God. Which you have, it goes on, which is in you, the set apart spirit, that's how the Shekinah was described by some of the Jewish scribes as being within as well. So let me read that again. Set apart spirit who is in you, which you have from Elohim, and you are not your own. Wow, you're not this little rebellious, personal Lord and Jesus all by yourself, Lone Ranger. No, that's it's hard for us to learn that, this idea about community and about assembly. We are not our own. For you were bought with a price, therefore the glory of Elohim is in your body and in your spirit, which are of Elohim. So this dwelling place is the pattern for each of us to follow. Paul is even referencing this idea of that spirit to be within us. The dwelling place is the pattern for each of us to follow. The innermost and the center of this house, then, is what? Is that Ark of the Covenant, but what's even in there? It's the covenant and the commands. And I think that at least by looking at the dwelling place or the Mishkan in this way, we can gather and we can see even how Paul used this to edify others. And we can understand that to edify ourselves, to understand these things as well that we can gather from this concept. So in that house, if the centermost part is about the commandments, and the covenant is held there as well. And here's a big one. It's spoken plenty of times. The place where he places his name. The character of who he is. The place where he places his name. And from there, that innermost. So if we flip that and try to really see, that's what he wants us to be too. We should be that Mishkan, the place where the Most High dwells within the center. And if he's the center of us and the center of our life, then his name is there. And now you can see why it says in the commandments, don't bring my name down. And it has nothing about verbally cussing or anything. It has more to do with don't bring shame to my family name, because I'm allowing you to be part of this family. So from within, within the image of the unseen, so to speak, because that's somewhat when we're talking about the Shekinah, but we also see that there's evidence that of the unseen being seen too. So it can be crazy. So from within then, within the Mishkan, this dwelling place, so within us then should be the image of the one that we can't see. That and what comes out should be made visible, making the whole body set apart. And you can see how that fits together. We operate in that same manner. So if that Shekinah, or if we are a dwelling place for the Most High to dwell within us, not only in us or in our midst, then the same principles that we see in the dwelling place, we need the same, because that's what the dwelling place was. That's where he met and commanded his people, gave the people instruction, gave the people grace in whatever that was happening, gave the people forgiveness and mercy. So if that's coming out of his house from the innermost part, then that should be coming out of within us as well. We should, because that's, to me, that's that whole idea. Even those who outside never went in, only the high priest, right? But the high priest brought out the image of it. We didn't need this. We don't need to see it. You know, remember I talked about the in-depth on this. It's these actions is where we see the Most High. That was the important part. The actions that we show who the God that we cannot see, we show who he is in our actions. And that's what people see. There's where people will see who he is, through that. For some reason, that duplicated again. I have to look at my notes. So if there's any questions, I don't see any on the Zoom, or if any questions or comments, there's a mic out there. Just raise your hand. Exodus 36. And he made curtains of goat's hair for the tent cover the cover the dwelling place, or the Mishkan. He made 11 curtains. The length of each curtain was 30 cubits, and the width of each curtain 4 cubits, and 11 curtains having one measure, and he joined 5 curtains by themselves and 6 curtains by themselves. And he made 50 loops on the edge of the end of the curtain in one set, and 50 loops he made on the edge of the curtain of the second set. And he made 50 bronze hooks to join the tent to be one. Again, this idea, there's always this idea of it becoming one and unified. Now, I guarantee it, there's plenty more in about the 50 loops and the curtains themselves. And again, I see there's probably so much sitting in the text that we just don't get because we haven't maybe studied it out. We haven't looked very far. So, but I do want to at least when we're looking at it through this study, take some things home that we can apply. Yes, Sister Pat.
It didn't occur to me until tonight that your opening screen was showing pictures of what was expected in assembling that IKEA product. Moses got to see a visual, but these people who put it together didn't have that visual. They had to do just like we are and try to imagine how to assemble it by just the wording. Yeah. I think that's pretty remarkable.
Well, it is. But I think what we find out when we even looking so far, we begin to see, wow, how much some of this stuff is right here on the surface. Because I just read from Paul how he was relating that the Mishkan being the temple, and you are the temple, and the set apart spirits in you. So there's no disconnect between what Paul is saying in the tabernacle, and what I think has happened a lot of times is there is somewhat a disconnect with those believers in Jesus, so to speak. The temple's one thing, and the tabernacle, that was all nice, but it's different now. But I think those who profess Yeshua are seeing that there's something bigger there, and it's one does not negate the other, and obviously I think as we've learned going back into the Old Testament and looking and see, oh man, there's so much about our Messiah, there's so much about our God who's teaching us stuff, and we need to take the time to go back. And that's how we understand our Messiah in a much deeper way as well. But thank you, Pat, because we have to ponder these things. So let's continue. And I know it might be kind of boring because there's like, oh, I'm not making you pictures on how it was done or whatever. And again, if there's any things that stick out to you, just raise your hand. And he made it, ultimately, you see this tent, the way it was done, there was a covering. So right there's interesting things in this idea of covering. He made a covering for the tent of ramskin, dyed red, and a covering of fine leather above that. And for the dwelling place, he made boards of acacia wood, standing up. The length of each board was 10 cubits, and the width of each board 1.5 cubits. Each board had 2 tendons for binding one to another. So he did to all the boards of the dwelling place. Again, this idea that they come together. Obviously, if you're building any kind of structure, you want it to come together. And he made boards of the Mishkan, the dwelling place, 20 boards for the south side. He made 40 sockets of silver to go under the 20 boards, and 2 sockets under each of the boards for its 2 tendons. And for the other side of the dwelling place, for the north side, he made 20 boards. And there 40 sockets of silver, 2 sprockets under the one board and 2 sockets under the other board. So what we have is directions going here, north and south. And I have a little bit on that because I did study that a little bit, and I think there's some really interesting insights in that concept too. So we'll look into that here in just a bit. And he made 6 boards for the west side of the dwelling place, and he made 2 boards for the 2 back corners of the dwelling place, and they were doubled breadth, and similarly they were complete to the top by 1 ring. So he did to both of them for the 2 corners, and there were 8 boards and their silver sockets, 16 sockets, 2 sockets under each of the boards, and he made boards of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on one side of the dwelling place, and 5 bars. Oh, I'm sorry. He made 4 bars of acacia wood, 5 for the boards on the side of the dwelling place, and 5 bars for the boards on the other side of the dwelling place, and 5 bars for the boards of the dwelling place at the rear westward. And he made the middle bar to pass through the boards from one end to the other. And he overlaid the boards with gold, and their rings he made of gold to be holders for the bars, and overlaid the bars with gold. There is a lot here in this instructions that what's going on. But what I thought was interesting, at least some of the that I thought I could speak to, I lost my cursor. It's jumping from one. I've got it back here. Okay. So what I thought was interesting, and when I was reading, or at least that was stood out, and maybe this is some things I think that it's more of a like we got to learn to maybe think differently that we have in the past. The west side, I have that specifically because that's the C-word side. That's actually what it's saying. It doesn't say west like we would say, oh, west, north, south. They used other terms that dictated what that was. The east side is where the openings face the gate door. Okay, you had the west side. The east side is where the openings of the Mishkan are placed. Now, what I think is interesting with this particular word for east is kedem, and it literally means the direction of the rising sun. That's what it means. And if I understood what I was reading, time and distance refer to the same thing and literally to the direction of the rising sun. So the rising sun, we would say that it'd be the east to us. We would understand that. But that's what we call the east. We say east, that is the sun. One implication that I see here of the associated word that is the origin of things have come from, or does come and will come from the east. What I'm saying is, you hear the term east all the time, and it seems like everything's originating from the east. That seems like to be where things are come from, the rising sun. So it's interesting how that's used. So here I got a couple little lists. For instance, Yom is west, that's the seaside. Kadam, east. Teman, that's the right or the south. Shemo, left or north. And I got this from this gentleman, Richard Brown. He talks about this, and I just thought it was interesting what he was saying. But this stood out. We use north as our major orientation on maps. At least by what he was saying, that's not the case with the ancients. They used something different. While we use north as our major direction, the Hebrews, according to him, uses the east, and other directions are oriented to that direction. So, how we say north is usually up, seems to be what the east is our north, so to speak. That's where what he's trying to say. For example, one of the words for south is, as we see here, teman, which is the root of yom, meaning to the right. So it's kind of interesting. And that is fascinating to study in itself. And that brings me to my mind the one thing, reading, and if this is the true in that concept of how they thought, a lot of things are completely opposite of how we would think. And one of them I thought was pretty interesting that I also read from Jeff Banner on his site was, we tend to say you have a bright future ahead, right? That the future is ahead of us. It's in front of us. But what I discovered, it seems like that's not the case in how the Hebrews would think. The past is what's in front of you. And that's based on because you can see it. You can never, unless you got a mirror, you can never see behind you. And you don't know your future. You cannot see it. So that would be, your future would be behind you. And that's kind of interesting to think in that concept. But it kind of makes a lot of sense to me in that sense, because if your past is seen, your past is always seen, all your mistakes, all your failures, but all your accomplishments, the things you did right, all those are before you, teaching you. Okay? So if you remember what was good or remember what was bad, that's going to dictate where you can't see where you're going. And that ultimately that would be your future that's behind you because you can't see it. And our Elohim, to me, he's all about remembering and remembering and remembering. How many times does he say, remember this and remember that? And that brings us, if we're looking at that concept, and this, again, is one of those little trails that I went down, but I think can add a lot to us. That verb to remember is kind of interesting. It's zakar, okay? And like I said, this idea of remembering, it actually, that concept or this particular verb to mean that, 233 times in the text, he tells us to remember. So obviously, he wants us to remember these things that he's applying to because he always says that. But if that isn't enough, there's an adjective or the masculine noun of zakar is of this word. Zakar. And it actually means male. It means male, whether human or animal. And I couldn't help but think, which I'm sure if you ladies are thinking to yourself, oh, the word for based and remember is also the word for male. Maybe the female was created to remind the male on what to remember. I get a lot of remembering. So, and obviously there's a teaching in that word study with that whole concept. So maybe there's something about that whole idea. Well, the word male is rooted in that same concept of remember. But it also brings back to, remember Zechariah. Zechariah's name is rooted in that verb and that idea as well. And it means Yehovah remembers. And that's very fitting to me when we see, if you look at the opening verses of Zechariah, it's a call to repentance. That's how the book opens. That's how this prophet begins. And it says, and you shall say to them, thus says Yahweh of hosts, turn back to me, declares Yahweh of hosts, and I shall return to you, back to you, declares Yahweh of hosts. So it's interesting that the prophet Isaiah does a lot of recalling, make a memorial, remember where you come from, and remember that we need to turn back. Did you have a comment, Ward?
The words you have up on the slide. So in the instructions, what it's saying is when you start the construction, you're facing east. Okay, and then it says to go to the right or to go southward. And in the Hebrew, how you would translate that to the English, it says you're facing east, you're going to turn to your right, which means you're facing south, but this southward in English would mean clockwise. So you're going to go clockwise,
yeah.
And build the south half of the tabernacle, and then you're facing west. And then it says, turn right, go northward, which again is clockwise. So then you're going to go around to where you were in a clockwise fashion, building the north half of the tabernacle. And in verse 36-31, where it says he made bars of acacia wood, 5, and we have 5 fingers, 5 for the frames of one side of the tabernacle, and 5 bars for the frames of the other side of the tabernacle. So then, if you look at that word "side," it's the Hebrew word is a feminine construct for. It's an anatomy term for your side and rib. So it's saying each of these 5 things you're making 5 and then another 5. So 5 goes on the south half and 5 on the north half. It's their ribs. So there's a lot of this human anatomy references to what you're building that's going into the tabernacle.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And so when you go through these instructions, like just as an example, look at the English word side. There's 10 or 15 or 20, I can't remember exactly off the top of my head. There's just look at the Hebrew words. They're translated from Hebrew to English as side. The Hebrew words are different. They're stripping the meaning out of the word, all these different words that are, a lot of them are human anatomy words that give you deeper information about what they're doing. And the translation, you lose it. So you need to actually look at all the Hebrew words and the whole instructions to really, like you said earlier, to really get in depth about to what it's really talking about.
No, and thanks for it. And that is true, because I've come across that so much. A lot of the words that relate to the physical body we have right in front of us. Like you're saying, the ribs and the fingers, and that's really amazing. Because I didn't. Well, I'll mention it here because I know the one Bible I look at it does have some of those terms in it for when the curtain loops come together. One set of the curtain loops was woman to sister, and the other curtains were man to brother. Those types of terminology. What that actually means, I don't know, but it's those terminologies are there in the text, and and that and like Ward said, and there's a lot in the text that we are not even touching. So let me continue here with some of the other items. And he made a veil of blue and purple and scarlet material of fine work linen. It was made with cherubim, the work of a skilled workman, a work of a designer that knew what he was doing, thought it through. And he made 4 columns of acacia wood for it, and it overlaid them with gold and with their hooks of gold. And he cast 4 sockets of silver for them. And he made a covering for the tent door of blue and purple and scarlet material and fine woven linen, and made by a weaver. And its 5 columns with their hooks, and he overlaid their tops with their rings with gold, and their 5 sockets were of bronze. So it's interesting, even the colors that are used in the tabernacle, I think, is amazing. And this here is describing the veil, and I think the actual the curtain. It seems like there was a curtain that you would first go in, and then ultimately the veil was that one that separated from the most holy of holies, that the very innermost part. So that would have, in a sense, the veil one separated that, almost in some sense, the terminology of, I looked at a lot, it's the heavens from the earth in some sense, because this is that place where they met with him, so this section was even more set apart than all the other sections or the surrounding structures that were there. So what I thought was interesting just on that, since a lot of our brothers and sisters out there celebrating Easter, they just celebrated the risen Messiah and Passover, and I know with ours and how our calendar is, yet we're going to be yet doing that. But I thought it was appropriate in some ways because of the time. Because when we talk about the veil, we've heard a lot about that. You know, one of the major things probably comes to your mind when Messiah, gave up his spirit, or when he was crucified, the veil had been torn into 2 from top to bottom. So at that time, it would have been this same type of idea seems to be, at least in the tabernacle, was in the temple, where there's this veil that separated, had the same thing. So the temple, the curtain veil that was there at the time Messiah, it could have been seen. If those doors were open, it very well could have been visually seen. So, and I would say this obviously must have been the case when the Passover lambs were being slaughtered in front of them, that they opened the doors and that what was going on. So you would have been able to look up to see this into the temple and see this curtain, not into the most holies in the holy place, but you'd be able to see that curtain. It would be hanging in the most furthest back part that you would see it. So that seems to be the one that was torn in 2, or being referenced in the Gospels that we read about. But I thought in this curtain at the time of Messiah in the temple was 30 feet wide and 60 foot tall. So it was a big sucker. The thing was very, very big. So I thought this would be appropriate to see the size. This is the American flag. This is being flown over the Mackinac Bridge here. It's in Michigan, right? So you see it's 30 by 60, the same exact proportions to what was in the temple. This is the temple. I know we were talking about the tabernacle, but this veil. So you can look how big that is. That really gives you a visual on the size of that veil, that curtain. So you can see that could have been clearly seen by a lot of people, depending on how, if the doors were open. And so it wouldn't, obviously, if that thing ripped in half, they would have known. They would have seen it. It would probably made a nice sound too, coming down. So So let's go to Exodus 37. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long. Oops, I'm sorry, Paul. He says, I thought since we are facing east, then the left would be our north. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
Left.
right. Going to the left would be your north, but where does it say that? You go southward, so you're going to your right. You start facing east.
East would
You
be
go-
our, and on the right side
and you go
would
to your
be
right,
south.
southward. Go clockwise. So you're going clockwise around. Then you're facing west, and then you go to your right, northward, clockwise until you get back around to where you're facing east again.
Yeah.
So you're going in a great big circle.
That's cool. Okay. Bezalel made the ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide and 1.5 cubits high. And he overlaid it with clean gold inside and out and made a molding of gold all around it. And he cast 4 rings of gold for it, for its 4 feet, 2 rings on its one side and 2 rings on its other side. And he made poles of acacia wood and overlaid them gold. And he put the poles into the rings at the sides of the ark to lift the ark. And he made the lid of atonement of gold, of clean gold. And clean gold, it's interesting because that has that idea of very pure gold. 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. I wonder how heavy that really was, because gold weighs a lot. Then it goes on, and he made 2 cherubim of beaten gold. He made them from the 2 ends of the lid of atonement. 1 cherubim at one end on this side, and the other cherub at the other end on that side. He made the cherubim, and you notice it is at least in this translation, it's nice. You see cherubim is the plural, obviously, and cherub is the singular. And he laid the lid of atonement from the 2 ends. And the cherubim spread out their wings above and covered the lid of atonement with their wings, with their faces towards each other. The faces of the cherubim were turned towards the lid of atonement. So it sounds like, obviously they were facing each other, but downward. So, and I've seen artist renditions where actually, in some sense, it is considered his throne, where maybe it even had the appearance in a sense of you could actually sit on it and had that visual part of it. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But there's still a lot that we can gain by the verbiage here and what's going on. Especially when you're talking about cherubim, or the cherub and the cherubim here. I think that's interesting because remember, okay, this is on the ark, on the innermost part, the most solid gold piece laying on top of the Ark of Covenant. And underneath this seat is the commandments, the witness, okay? The covenant, so to speak, is there. And we have, I don't see why you can't say we have 2 cherubim guarding it. And why I'm saying that, because that brings up this idea, Genesis 3:23. It says, so Yahweh Elohim sent him out of the Garden of Eden. Obviously, this is Adam and Hava, to till the ground from which he was taken. And he drove the man out, and he placed cherubim Hear it again, at the east of the Garden of Eden. And I've read a lot of things where the Mishkan, in a sense, is that idea at the same time as being an Eden or a representation of the Garden of Eden. So he cherubim at the east of the Garden of Eden, and a flaming sword which turned every which way to guard the way to the tree of life. So, just on the simplest parts, if we would, I would say to you, we have cherubim there. They're guarding the commandments. We all have been evicted out of the garden, but yet the cherubim are there where the tree of life is, and it seems like life is in the commandments and in that covenant, that they're coming from the same place. So in short, if we follow those commandments, that's how we get back into the Garden of Eden, by that covenant and the obedience to those commandments. That's what I would get out of that when you combine those two ideas together. And ultimately, that's his father's house. So that, to me, fits in just perfectly because we were part of his family. However, what happened, we have Messiah, however you want to look at, grafted in, adopted in. You are Israel. You're part of his family, and all the covenants that are placed there. And this is in Exodus 25. It speaks about this ark as well. I think it's important. And you shall put the lid of atonement on the top of that ark. So again, that atonement plays a part here. And if we go along with the how would you say it? The storyline is maybe the best way. Moses is here at Mount Sinai, getting the commandments. So Passover has happened, right? Unleavened bread has happened. First fruits have happened. They're at the mountain receiving all these commandments. And now it's talking about atonement somewhere now, which, if you know the feast, it's the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and then Sukkot, the ingathering. So to me, I see these patterns there. But it goes on, and put in the ark the witness which I gave you, and I shall meet with you there. And from the lid of atonement, from between the two cherubim, which on the ark of the witness, I shall speak to you all that which I commanded you concerning the children of Israel. So in some ways, I don't think that's very far off, because from those two cherubim, from there is the witness, and from there he teaches it, because that's where his name is. It's in it's in his house. It's in that center part of his house. So ultimately, the face of the cherubim were turned towards the lid of atonement. So I don't think it would be bad theology to think that we need to be atoned. That is showing us where we need to be atoned to get back into the garden. The ark is the heart of the dwelling place. Deuteronomy 5:29 says this, "Oh, that they had such a heart in them to fear me and to guard all my commands always, so that it might be well with them and their children forever." Jeremiah speaks about the same thing. "And I shall give them a heart to know me, and that I am Yahweh, and they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim. For they shall turn back to me with all their heart." So you can see these concepts, I think, that are beautifully interwoven, even in the Mishkan, this dwelling place, that there's plenty that we can take out. Plenty that we don't understand, but plenty that we can take out and apply for our lives that I think would be good practices, and ultimately does not do what it says, makes his dwelling place one, to bring his dwelling place in our midst, within us and in our midst. And he made the tablet of acacia wood 2 cubits long and a cubit wide and a cubit and a half high. And he overlaid it with clean gold again and made a molding of gold all around it. And he made the rim of a handbreadth all around it and made a molding of gold for the rim all around it. And he cast 4 rings of gold for it, and he put the rings on the 4 corners that were at its 4 legs. The rings were next to the rim as holders for the poles to lift the table. And he made the poles of acacia wood to lift the table and overlaid them with gold. Again, we see this idea of this being portable, and I can only apply that to apply that idea because we are portable. We get around. If we are these little mishkans, these little dwelling places for the Most High, we got to keep our place clean. That's one thing. You see, there wasn't a whole lot of clutter in his place. Not a whole lot of room. Everything was pure gold in the innermost place. Then it goes on, and he made the utensils which were on the table, and its dishes, and its cups, and its bowls, and its jars for pouring of clean gold. So everything was made of gold here, and again, it's just the simplicity that's there. There's plenty more things that I know that we could mine out, so to speak, from all these items, even much more. And he made the lampstand of clean gold. He made the lampstand of a beaten work, its base and its shaft, its cups, its ornamental knobs, and its blossoms were from it. And 6 branches came out of its side, 3 branches of the lampstand out of one side, and 3 branches of the lampstand out of the other side. There were 3 cups like almond flowers on one branch, and ornamental knobs and blossoms, and the 3 cups like almond flowers on the other branch, a knob and a blossom. So for the 6 branches coming out of the lampstand, like what Ward had mentioned too, not only do we see the human anatomy, we see so much of things right outside our door, the created things being described here. So ultimately, you can see, in some sense, the wording here, it's like a tree of light. It's a tree of light. The thing is, this, as we know, this thing has to be maintained, or else it has no light. It's beautiful, but it's even more beautiful when it's lit up so you can see it. And then it's interesting to see, I always thought, and this is just some of the thoughts I've had when looking at the menorah in depth, is, 3 on each side. And ultimately, you do see how man has a number of 6. So, not that this is truth, but I think it's something to think about. 3 on each side, if that's the representation of man, unless we have that center one, that's what keeps those branches going. And obviously, I'm speaking about the Most High, his Son, the Most High. That's what keeps them. But it's interesting to see how these blossoms work out on the branches that come out and how they're described. And I got to tell you, you can clearly see this idea of bearing the flower, bearing fruit, and then that becomes the light that is held at the top. So there's many pictures that we can see. Even Messiah's words, a lot of his parables and stuff. Not that he was specifically talking about these things, but at the same time, in a lot of his parables that he talked about, you can see the likeness and apply the same kind of understanding that's going on with the menorah as well. 7-branch menorah is the one I'm speaking of, not the Hanukkah. You know. And on the lampstand were 4 cups like almond flowers, its knobs and its blossoms. I believe that word blossom there is zitzit, or it's based in that idea of what we wear to remind us of his commandments. And a knob under the first 2 branches of the same. You know, that's something to think about, just with that idea. Especially it's spring now. We see the blossoms, that beautiful part of the plant that comes out. You know, and what is so interesting about that is if it was not for that blossom, because right behind that blossom is sitting the fruit that's going to come out on that plant. So you begin to see the concept, especially if I would turn to the zitziot, the zitzis that we wear to remind us of those commandments. Because if we're reminded of those commandments and are that beautiful flower, when it fades, that's where that fruit's going to come. If we're not doing those commandments, that fruit of the Spirit, that fruit will not come out. So you can see so much. There's so many wonderful teachings and understandings just outside our doors that no man can take away. Then it goes on, 2 branches same, and the 6 branches coming out. Their knobs and their branches were of it. All of it was one beaten work of gold. It was unified, so to speak. And he made 7 lamps. Those are the lights up above. And its snuffers and its trays of clean gold. He made it of a talent of gold and all its utensils. We still have a little bit of time, so I'll just finish at least Exodus 37 so we can at least tell Mark we got that far, right? And if there's any other questions or anything. And he made the incense altar of acacia wood, 1 cubit long and 1 cubit wide, square, and 2 cubits high. Its horns were of it. And he overlaid it with clean gold, its top and its sides all around, and its horns. And he made a molding for it of gold all around it. And he made 2 rings of gold for it under its molding and its 2 corners on both sides, as holders for the poles for which to lift it. And he made the poles of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. And he made the set-apart anointing oil and the clean incense of sweet spices according to the work of a perfumer. So that gives us, again, how they went about some of the measurements and some of the instructions that went on in the tabernacle. So if you've gotten anything out of this, I hope you get that it takes, like I said in the beginning, assembly is required. All of the assembly is required for building the house of our God, because that consists of us as well too. So if there isn't any other questions, I can close up a little bit early today. Okay. Father, how great and mighty you are. There is none like you. Father, we thank you for you sharing your words, sharing your heart, knowing that you desire to be in our midst and within us, Father. And Father, that's our desire too. So, Father, continue to help us to be in the image of your Son. Father, we thank you for your Spirit. We thank you for your forgiveness. We thank you for the redemption that we see in your Son, Yeshua, our Messiah and our King. We thank you for the empowerment of your Spirit to overcome all things. Thank you for your provision that you give us. We just simply love you, Father, and help us to love you even more. Amen. Well, shalom, everyone, or how would Laila Tov, right? good evening to you all. I'm glad all of you guys came, and those online, thanks for joining us. And Mark will be back next week. Shalom.